I told my in-laws to stop criticizing my wife, and now they've cut us off. I never thought I'd be in this position, but here I am, cut off from my in-laws after standing up for my wife. All we ever wanted was a peaceful life together, but my in-laws couldn't keep their opinions to themselves. For years, they made rude comments about her, about the way she managed the house, even about the way she raised our kids. I put up with it, hoping it would get better, but it didn't. Eventually, I had enough, and I told them to stop criticizing my wife. What I didn't expect was that doing so would tear our family apart. This is the story of how I stood up for my wife, and how, in return, we lost everything we once had with my in-laws. It started small. At first, it was just the occasional comment about the way my wife, Lily, cooked dinner, or how she cleaned the house. Little things. I convinced myself they didn't mean any harm. Everyone has their preferences, right? Maybe my mom thought she could do a better job in the kitchen, or thought my wife could be a bit more organized. But over time, those little comments turned into something bigger. The passive-aggressive remarks became more frequent. I would come home to find my mother-in-law making comments about how the house wasn't as neat as it could be, or my father-in-law suggesting that maybe Lily could spend less time on her phone and more time focusing on the kids. It was constant. And it wasn't just about the house or the kids anymore. It was about how Lily managed everything. They started questioning her choices, undermining her at every turn. And it was always in front of me, in front of our kids. At first, I let it slide. I didn't want to make waves. I didn't want to be that guy who causes tension between his wife and his family. But then, one weekend, it all came to a head. Lily had been preparing for a big family dinner. She had planned everything, from the menu to the decorations. She had asked for help, but no one offered. As usual, she did everything herself. When we finally sat down to eat, my mother-in-law made a comment about how the potatoes weren't seasoned just right. My father-in-law nodded along, agreeing with her. That's when I lost it. I had heard enough of it, and it was time to put a stop to it. I couldn't sit quietly any longer. I looked at my in-laws, sitting there, casually criticizing everything my wife had done to make the dinner special. My wife, who had worked tirelessly, was now sitting there with a forced smile, trying to brush off their remarks. I could see it in her eyes. She was hurt, and honestly, I was fed up. Enough, I finally said, cutting through the conversation. The room went silent. Everyone looked at me in shock. My mom raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by my sudden outburst. My dad, who usually kept his distance from these things, gave me a warning look, but I didn't care anymore. You both need to stop, I said, my voice firm, yet calm. You've been criticizing Lily for years now, and I'm not going to let it happen anymore. She's doing her best, and you need to respect that. The table was quiet. For a few moments I thought I had overstepped, that maybe I had gone too far. But I had to do it. I had to stand up for her. My mother-in-law scoffed. I'm just trying to offer some advice, that's all. No, I shot back. You're not offering advice. You're undermining her. You've been doing it for years. And I've let it slide because I thought it would get better, but it hasn't. Lily's face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and relief. I could tell she was grateful for my support, but I also saw how uncomfortable she was with the confrontation. I'm sorry if it makes you uncomfortable, I continued, addressing Lily. But I won't let them disrespect you anymore. Not in our house, not in front of our kids. There was a long, tense pause. My father-in-law finally spoke up, his voice low and dismissive. This is a family matter, and you're making it worse. Maybe you should learn to handle your wife better. My blood started to boil. Don't talk about my wife like that, I said, keeping my voice as steady as I could. You're not welcome to give me relationship advice. That was the moment the line was crossed. The silence in the room thickened, and I knew this wasn't just going to blow over. I had drawn a line in the sand, and there was no going back. After I said my piece, the room stayed dead silent. My parents didn't know how to react, and Lily was still processing everything. I could tell she was grateful, but she was also feeling uneasy. My mother-in-law, however, was fuming. She didn't say anything at first, but the look she gave me was enough. I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. The rest of the dinner was uncomfortable. My mom tried to make small talk, but it felt forced. The awkwardness hung in the air like a thick fog. Lily and I did our best to keep the conversation flowing, but I could feel the tension. The vibe had completely shifted. After the dinner, I thought things might settle down, that maybe my in-laws would take a step back and rethink their behavior, but the opposite happened. Over the next few days, I noticed small, passive-aggressive remarks from both my mother-in-law and father-in-law whenever they would visit. They started nitpicking everything, from the way Lily kept the house to how we raised our kids. It was like they were deliberately pushing buttons, testing the boundaries to see how far they could go. I tried to stay calm, but it wasn't easy. Every time they came over, it felt like I was walking on eggshells. They would act like everything was fine, but I could sense the underlying tension. They made it clear that they weren't happy with me standing up for my wife. And Lily, who had been quietly trying to keep the peace for so long, was now visibly uncomfortable with their presence. It wasn't just their behavior toward her. It was the subtle way they treated both of us, like we were out of line for setting boundaries. I didn't want to give up on my relationship with them. I didn't want to make things worse. But I was getting tired of pretending like everything was fine when it wasn't. I had already made my decision to stand up for my wife, but I couldn't help but feel like I was losing my family in the process. It wasn't long before the tension between us and my in-laws escalated to something more than just passive-aggressive comments. One evening, Lily and I decided to invite them over for dinner to try to smooth things over. I was hoping for a fresh start, a chance to clear the air and show them that we could still be a family despite the recent conflict. But as soon as they walked in, I could feel the frost in the air. It was like nothing had changed. As dinner went on, the same old dynamics started to resurface. My mother-in-law made a pointed remark about Lily's cooking again, this time saying the vegetables didn't taste as fresh as they should. It was a comment I had heard too many times before, and this time I couldn't hold back. I set my fork down, my hands shaking with frustration. "Enough," I said, my voice surprisingly calm despite the storm brewing inside me. "I've had enough of this. You're disrespecting Lily, and I won't sit here and let you do it anymore." Lily looked at me, her face a mix of shock and relief. She hadn't expected me to say anything, and I could see her trying to process how much I had been holding back. My mother-in-law opened her mouth to say something, but I cut her off. No more passive-aggressive comments. No more criticizing my wife behind her back. If you have a problem with something, say it directly, but do not continue undermining her. This has gone on for far too long. My father-in-law's face turned red, and he looked like he was about to argue, but I wasn't done. "And don't even think about blaming Lily for this. This is on you." Lily stood up, visibly shaking. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for you to treat me like I'm not good enough," she said, her voice breaking. "I love your son. I'm doing my best, and I don't deserve to be treated this way." The room was completely still. No one spoke for what felt like an eternity. I could see my in-laws looking at each other, unsure of what to say. The tension was suffocating. Finally, my mother-in-law spoke, but her voice was colder than ice. "I don't know what you expect from us. We're just trying to help." "You're not helping," I shot back. "You're hurting us. And if you can't respect our boundaries, then maybe it's time we take a step back." The weight of my words hung in the air. We had crossed a line, and it felt like there was no going back. My in-laws didn't respond right away. They gathered their things in silence, exchanged tense glances, and left without another word. I looked at Lily, who was still standing by the table. Her eyes were filled with tears, but I could tell she was relieved. She had been carrying this burden for so long, and now we had finally done something about it. But as my in-laws walked out the door, I couldn't help but wonder, was this the right choice? Had I just ruined our relationship with my family forever? The days following that dinner were eerily silent. My in-laws didn't reach out, and neither did I. I thought there would be some sort of conversation, an apology, or at least an attempt to make amends, but instead, there was nothing. We had crossed a line, and it seemed like they weren't willing to come back from it. Lily and I spent those next few days processing what had happened. On the outside, everything seemed calm. Life continued as usual, but every time I thought about the fallout, I felt the weight of it pressing down on me. I had stood up for my wife, but in doing so, I had caused a rift that might never heal. Lily was quiet during this time. She was grateful for what I had done, but I could see the guilt in her eyes. She didn't want to lose her family, but she didn't want to continue putting up with the way they treated her. I couldn't blame her for feeling conflicted. It wasn't an easy situation for either of us. "I didn't want this," Lily said one evening as we sat on the couch watching TV in silence. "I didn't want to cause a rift between you and your parents, but I can't keep letting them walk all over me." I know, I replied, taking her hand in mine, and I don't want to lose my family either, but I won't let them disrespect you, not anymore. That was the heart of the issue, how much we both cared about each other, and how, at the end of the day, our happiness and peace had to come first. It was painful to see the relationship with my family unravel, but I knew in my heart that I had done the right thing. We both had. Then, a week later, I received an unexpected call from my mom. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice tense but soft. I hesitated for a moment before agreeing. I didn't know what she wanted, but I was ready to face whatever was coming. My family had always been the type to avoid confrontation, so if my mom was calling, it was serious. I met my mom at a local cafe, a neutral spot where we could talk without the tension of being in either of our homes. When I walked in, she was already seated, looking down at her coffee. Her face was a mixture of concern and hesitation, and I could tell she had been thinking about this conversation for a while. I sat down across from her, trying to read her expression. "What's going on, Mom? What did you want to talk about?" She sighed deeply before finally meeting my eyes. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened, about the dinner, about you standing up to us, and I want to apologize." My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't expected this. My mom wasn't one to apologize easily, and the fact that she was now admitting that things had gone too far made me realize how serious this situation was. "I didn't realize how much pressure my side of the family was putting on you two," she continued. "And I'm sorry. I've seen how hard Lily has worked to make everything right, and I know I've let things go on longer than I should have. You were right to speak up." I took a deep breath, surprised by how much this meant. I'd been waiting for this moment for so long, but now that it was happening, it felt bittersweet. We had reached a place where my mom was finally acknowledging the problem, but it didn't change the fact that the damage had already been done. "Thank you, Mom," I said quietly, trying to hold back the emotions that had been building up for weeks. "But it's not just about what happened at dinner. It's about the years of criticism, the way they've treated Lily. I don't know if we can just move past that." My mom looked down at her coffee, her fingers tracing the rim of the cup. "I understand that, and I can't change what's happened, but I'm hoping we can find a way to rebuild this. We're family, and I don't want to see you lose your relationship with us." I nodded, feeling a bit of the weight lift off my shoulders. This wasn't going to be easy, and I knew it wasn't going to be resolved overnight, but hearing my mom acknowledge the situation was a step in the right direction. "I'll talk to your father and your sister," my mom said, her voice soft but firm. "We all need to have a real conversation about this, and I'll make sure they understand where I'm coming from. I don't want this to come between us anymore." As I left the cafe that day, I felt a sense of cautious hope. Maybe, just maybe, things could start to heal. Maybe there was a chance for us to rebuild the relationship with my family, but it would take time. I couldn't change everything in one conversation, but it was a start. A few days after meeting with my mom, we had a family gathering. It wasn't the usual get-together with laughter and lighthearted conversation. There was a noticeable tension in the air as we all gathered around the dinner table. My parents, my sister, and I sat quietly, waiting for someone to speak, and then my mom broke the silence. "I've talked to your father and sister about everything that's happened, and we need to apologize, especially to Lily," she said, her voice calm but serious. My heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just some casual apology. This was an attempt to make things right. Lily, who had been sitting quietly beside me, looked up with cautious eyes, unsure of what was coming. She had been hurt by my family's treatment, and even though she had been supportive of me standing up for her, I knew the damage to her trust in them wasn't something that could be repaired overnight. "I know I've been critical," my mom continued, "and I know it was wrong. We have no right to undermine you, Lily, especially not in your own home. I want to make things right if you'll let me." Lily stayed quiet for a moment, processing my mom's words. Then, with a deep breath, she spoke. "It's not just about the comments, though. It's how they've made me feel like I don't belong. Like I'm not good enough for your son or for you. And it hurts." There was a long silence, and I could see my mom's face soften. She looked at my dad, who nodded. "We're sorry," my dad finally said, his voice low but sincere. "We shouldn't have treated you like that, and we'll work on being more respectful. We want to be a part of your life, and we want to support both of you." It wasn't an easy conversation. There was still a lot of hurt between us, and I could tell that Lily was hesitant. But for the first time in a long time, I saw a flicker of hope. The apology wasn't perfect. It wasn't going to erase the years of tension. But it was a start. Lily, after a long pause, finally spoke again. "Thank you. I want to believe that things can be better. But it's going to take time." "I understand," my mom said. "It won't happen overnight, but we'll try our best." After the apology, things felt a little less tense. But I knew that repairing the relationship with my in-laws wasn't going to be an easy, smooth journey. There were still so many lingering issues. My family was used to being critical of Lily, and even though my parents had apologized, old habits die hard. I was determined not to let things go back to how they were, but I also knew it would take more than one apology to fix the damage that had been done. Over the next few weeks, Lily and I had several conversations about our boundaries with my family. We both agreed that we couldn't keep letting the little things slide. If they said something disrespectful or made a hurtful comment, we had to call it out. This wasn't just about standing up for her anymore. It was about creating a new dynamic that would be healthy for all of us moving forward. But things didn't improve immediately. At family gatherings, I still felt that awkwardness, that distance. My parents tried, really, they did. They made an effort to be kinder, to say positive things about Lily. But every now and then, the old habits would sneak through. My mother would make a remark about how we should get the house tidier, or how the kids seemed a little more energetic than usual. It wasn't blatant criticism, but it was enough to set off that familiar frustration inside me. One evening, I couldn't take it anymore. We had invited my parents over for a small dinner, and my mom casually mentioned how we should be more disciplined with our kids, something she had always said in the past, but that now felt like a sharp jab. I looked at Lily, who was sitting beside me, her face red with the familiar embarrassment she had felt countless times before. My blood started to boil. I couldn't just sit there anymore. "Mom, we've been over this," I said, my voice firm. "You need to stop criticizing Lily, and you need to stop undermining how we're raising our kids. This isn't your place anymore." My mom looked taken aback, and my dad was silent. The room was tense, and I could see Lily's shoulders sag with a mixture of relief and anxiety. I knew it was hard for her to watch me confront my family again, but she also knew that I couldn't let these comments slide anymore. "I'm sorry," my mom said quietly, almost as if she hadn't realized how her words had landed. "I didn't mean it like that. I just worry." "I get that," I replied, "but worrying is different than criticizing. We're doing things our way now, and we need your support, not your judgment." There was a long pause before my dad spoke up. "You're right. We need to respect your decisions and give you space. We've been overstepping, and we need to stop. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. For the first time, I felt like my parents were truly listening. They weren't just saying what they thought would make things better. They were owning up to their actions and making an effort to change. And that gave me hope. The real challenge came a few weeks after our heart-to-heart. We were still in the process of rebuilding our relationship with my parents, but the hard work was starting to pay off. The atmosphere at family gatherings had become less tense, and we had fewer awkward silences. However, it still felt like we were all walking on eggshells, just waiting for something to go wrong. The smallest comment or misstep could set things back to square one, and I wasn't sure how much more my wife and I could take. Then came the real test, my sister's wedding. It was a big event, and naturally my entire family was involved in the planning. Lily and I were excited about it, but I could tell she was a little apprehensive. The wedding was supposed to be a joyful occasion, but it was also a reminder of how fragile our relationship with my parents had become. My sister was thrilled about the wedding, but I knew she had her reservations about the family dynamics too. She wanted everything to go smoothly, and didn't want the tension between me, Lily, and our parents to overshadow the day. The tension was inevitable. It always seemed like my mom and dad just couldn't help themselves. They would make comments about the way we were planning the event, or how we should have done this or that. I tried to stay calm, but it was starting to feel like we were back to square one. The real tipping point came the day before the wedding, when my mother suggested that we rethink the seating arrangements because Lily and I weren't seated at the same table as the rest of the family. I had intentionally asked for the seating arrangement to be that way, to create some space while things were still fragile. But my mom wouldn't let it go. "Lily and I can sit together," my mom insisted. "We can't have people feeling awkward at the wedding." I could feel my anger rising. I was on edge. Lily was already nervous about being around my family, and now my mom was crossing boundaries again. not respecting our need for space. Mom, we've talked about this, I said, trying to stay calm but firm. This is how we decided things, and it's not up for discussion. It's for the best. But my mom didn't back down. You can't seriously expect us to just ignore the tension. It's uncomfortable for everyone. At that moment, I snapped. I had put up with so much, but this was the last straw. I turned to my mom and said, "This is our wedding, and if you can't respect that, then maybe you shouldn't be involved at all. You've pushed us, and I've had enough of it." Lily looked at me, her eyes wide, but I could see the relief in her expression. I had finally said what needed to be said. I had drawn the line again. My dad, who had been silent up until now, stepped in. "Let's just try to keep the peace," he said, trying to diffuse the situation. "It's for your sister's sake." "I'm done keeping the peace," I shot back. "We're done pretending like everything's fine. We've been dealing with your constant criticism for years, and now I'm drawing the line. You're going to have to deal with it." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel the tension building again, and I wasn't sure where this would go next. But what I did know was this: I had finally had enough, and I wasn't going to let my parents undermine us any longer. The next few days before the wedding were a blur of awkward encounters and unresolved tension. My mom and dad tried to reach out, but the damage had been done. They apologized, but it didn't feel genuine. Every conversation felt forced, and Lily and I were both on edge. We had put so much energy into rebuilding our relationship with them, but it seemed like it was unraveling again faster than we could patch it up. On the day of the wedding, I tried to stay focused on my sister's big day. I didn't want the family drama to overshadow her happiness, but it was hard to keep my mind off everything that had happened. When Lily and I walked into the venue, we could immediately feel the tension. It wasn't just between us and my parents, it was in the air, palpable, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. At one point during the reception, my mom came over to talk to me. She was apologizing again, but it felt empty. Her words didn't match her actions, and I could see that she still wasn't fully grasping the depth of how much she had hurt us. "I know I've been hard on Lily, and I'm sorry for that," she said quietly, as though trying to make amends. "But you need to understand, I just want what's best for you." I could feel my patience thinning. "You've said that before, Mom, but you haven't listened. You haven't respected us, and that's what's been so hard." She looked at me with guilt in her eyes. "I know, and I wish I could go back and undo everything. I just don't want to lose you." I took a deep breath, trying to stay composed. I had been holding on to a lot of anger for so long, and even though I wanted to just explode, I knew I had to find a way to communicate this clearly without getting lost in emotion. "We don't want to lose you either, Mom. But it's not just about saying the right things. It's about showing respect. It's about understanding that Lily and I are a team, and we need space and support, not criticism." Her face fell, and I saw that familiar look of regret. But at that moment, I realized something. I wasn't just standing up for my wife anymore. I was standing up for my family. I was doing what needed to be done to protect the peace and respect that should be a foundation in every relationship. The rest of the evening was quieter. The family tried to go on as usual, but I could feel the shift. There was no big confrontation, no dramatic showdown. But there was something different. Something had changed. It wasn't going to be an easy road, but it was a step in the right direction. Standing up for my wife, confronting my parents, and making sure our boundaries were respected was one of the hardest things I've ever done. It wasn't easy, and I'm not going to pretend like everything is perfect now. It's still a work in progress. But what I've learned is this: sometimes we have to make hard choices to protect the people we love. We have to fight for respect and boundaries, even when it feels like we're risking everything. Have you ever had to stand up to your family or friends for someone you love? What was the outcome? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your experiences and how you've dealt with situations like this. And if you've enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. Remember, sometimes the hardest battles are the ones that shape us the most.